The world is shaping up for a revolution in aviation innovation. In the UK, businesses are already creating new, innovative, greener air transport solutions designed to offer more choice and reduce our carbon footprint. The Future Flight Challenge from UK Research and Innovation aims to create the aviation system of the future, allowing us to improve transport links between regions and in remote areas to connect people to education, jobs and healthcare. Our £125 million investment will allow the UK to build, use and export new transport technologies and be at the forefront of aviation innovation. We're bringing together industry experts to carry out research, development and demonstrations to solve mobility challenges in the UK. By encouraging innovators from a wide variety of sectors to work together, the projects we fund will help shape novel aviation approaches to enable the safe operation of radically new aircraft. Using drones to offer alternative ways of delivering goods and services, both in highly populated and remote areas. Carrying out offshore maintenance and surveillance for the renewable energy sector. The delivery of medical supplies. Surveying buildings after a fire or collapse to reduce the risk to human life. Or post-incident filming for evidence gathering. Using new and sustainable fuel sources to lower carbon emissions from advanced air mobility vehicles and electric or hybrid aircraft to help address the mobility and congestion problems in urban areas, and improve travel connections for rural communities where the development of ground infrastructure is difficult. These new modes of air transport will combine in a coordinated airspace where scheduled and on-demand flights work together to move people, goods and services. To enable widespread safe use of autonomous and electric air vehicles, Future Flight will bring together advanced technologies with control and regulation, physical and digital infrastructure systems, and new operating models. This new environment will be a catalyst for businesses to invest in the UK as we shape the global future of aviation and create a truly integrated aviation system. With a truly all-inclusive approach, Future Flight is transformational and will change our lives.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this session's Future Flight Fridays. I'm very glad to be with you all. I'm Jordan Fletcher. I work on the investment team at the KTN. So what does that mean in principle? Basically, I have the privilege to work across a whole variety of sectors and understand the investment cases within them and be able to support companies in accessing and understanding the investment landscape in the sector which they operate in. So today really is going to focus on the investment landscape. So the agenda is quite simple. We've got a panel, and our panel will include Daryl Swanson from Swanson Aviation, Michael Dynett from Nexa Capital. Susan will not be with us, but we have Michelle, a colleague who's going to join us from Ampere, and Addison Farrell from Skyports. So a good range of speakers with us today. And our aims are really to start to understand where investment fits into this as we progress from kind of the development phases into demonstration, then into industrialization, all the way across the future flight landscape and the technologies, all the way into a kind of service-based model. So a lot to discuss, many different ways the conversation could go, but really encouraging Q&A from the audience today. So please start thinking about your questions. Feel free to put them in nice and early. We'll try and incorporate them into the panel, but as you'll see on the agenda, we've got time for Q&A at the end, so we'll definitely make time for them, but also very conscious to try and wind them into the panel as well. So just going to start with some brief introductions and let the panelists introduce themselves. Brilliant, that's changed. So we're going to kick off with Addison, then we'll go through from right to left, and Daryl is then going to take us through a few slides to set the scene today. So over to you, Addison. Introduce yourself, let us know what you're working on, etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. Lovely to be here. I'm Addison Farrell. I'm head of Americas for Skyports, and I'm based in the US. Skyports designs, builds, and operates the takeoff and landing infrastructure for air taxis and cargo aircraft to enable safe, sustainable, and efficient flight operations within urban and suburban environments. Skyports also has a drone deliveries business through its logistics arm. We focus on deliveries to the medical, maritime, and logistics sectors, as well as surveillance services. It's fantastic to be here. Looking forward to this.
Brilliant, thank you. Michelle, over to you.
So Michiel Selier, filling in for Susan Ying. Susan is the Vice President of Global Operations of Ampere. She's on the west coast of the US, so the time was a bit difficult for her. My role is that I am the Deputy Manager of the 2.0 Future Flight project, which is being led by Ampere. And Ampere is an electric aircraft company that has a very pragmatic approach where we first will move to the market through retrofitting aircraft to hybrid electric and ultimately also put a brand new energy optimized aircraft into the market.
Thank you.
And very nice to be here as well. Looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks for coming. Michael, Nexa, over to you.
Thank you, Jordan. I'm Michael Diamond. I'm the managing partner of Nexa Capital. We are based in the Washington, D.C. area. We've been involved in infrastructure finance for many years and are providing capital through our investor sources in a number of cities now to begin to develop and evolve the needed infrastructure for advanced air mobility. So we're very excited to be invited back here, Jordan. Looking forward to the conversation.
Brilliant. And then Daryl, over to you. I know you've got a few slides, so a little bit of an introduction, and then feel free to run through your bits and pieces and set the scene for us.
Great, thank you very much. So I'm Daryl Swanson. I started my own company a few years ago to take a look at the infrastructure requirements for electric aviation. But then I soon realized that the Morgan Stanley report or Citibank reports or the various different reports out there which talk about electric aviation being worth billions by 2020, 2030 or whatever, you can't take them to the bank and get funding on that. So over the last couple of years, I've developed a modeling capability to actually determine how many people are going to switch from other modes of transport to advanced air mobility. So I've got a quick teaser set of slides, which is going to set it out. But a lot of it's based in the distributed aviation paper that I published through ADS. And funny enough, on the same day, NASA published their regional air mobility paper, and distributed aviation and regional air mobility. They're very close together. Distributed aviation leads to regional air mobility. So definitely go take a look at those papers when you get the chance. In the distributed aviation paper, we just set out some of the low-hanging fruit in the industry there. So we're looking at the UK airport pairs. We have a number of different electric aviation aircraft there and the size of the potential market that they could address from day one. And that's great, but that's not necessarily where the real opportunity is. We also looked at some of the existing city pairs that are currently or that were served by traffic in 2019 and looked at various different aircraft and what they could serve in terms of that network. So it really points out to the operational capability of some of these aircraft. And of course, you can see what vertical aerospace or Joby, Ampere could possibly cover a lot of that market as well. But again, the real problem is that electric aviation is going to happen at places where we don't necessarily have 20, 30, 50 years worth of statistics. So in a hub and spoke system, we've got great data and great information to build some of these demand models. And that's what a good aviation forecaster will do. That's some of the work that we can do. In the distributed aviation system, it's going to happen at places where we haven't got that kind of data. So in our city centers, there is data available. DFT supplies a lot of information, but it's very aggregated, and we really need to get that detailed information. So we've been looking towards mobile phone data. So it's GDPR and ISO 27001 compliant. So it's safe to use, and we're not identifying individual people. In fact, we're not interested in an individual traveler. I'm looking at 20 and 30,000 people who are doing trips in a week because that's the types of volumes you need to make it economically viable. And then you're able to get all the statistics out of the information. So we know modes of transport, we know purpose of transport, we can measure things like trips per 100,000 people between city pairs, so we actually understand the mobility of certain populations in their area. But the real proof in the pudding is actually when you're doing a schedule. So what we have here is some of the inputs that goes into our model. So we have the raw data, and I'm pointing to the screen, but of course I can't point to what you're seeing. But in line one there, we have the breakdown in terms of the splits between inbound and outbound traffic, because directionality does have a big thing to play in it. We have the split in terms of mode of transport and the purpose of transport. But we also have to take a look at the capacity of the system at either end. So we would look at the vertiport capacity at either end of a city pair to determine if that's actually a constraint, because otherwise you're chasing the rabbits in that the more vehicles you put onto a service, the more people are going to switch, and it's kind of like adding additional lanes to a highway. It's just going to fill up. But when you wash all that through the model, you get something like this, which is a daily demand profile based on an hourly basis. So this is one particular week that we're looking at. And then you can turn that into insights into potential demand for aircraft operations. And I think that has switched. So the next step to that is actually doing a scheduling analysis. So the graph that you're seeing there, the lower numbers is the actual aircraft operations going back and forth between Newcastle and this other location. I'm sorry, I can't quite tell you, but you're able to see that we're able to match the demand with the capacity quite closely, barring for that one day when there was a spike in the transport mix. So again, taking all of that information, we're able to get out the recharging requirements. We can get the number of stand requirements, so we know how much power is required at vertiport. We know how many stands are required at vertiport. So it really gives you good information on the planning and design side. From an OEM perspective, this is probably the big one. So for this particular route, we need about 30 aircraft to service that network. We're getting about 6 hours and 23 minutes average operational hour per day across a year. And so that translates into about 2,100 hours of flight time per year per aircraft. So that really starts to talk about what the economic viability of a route is. And we do this on a route by route basis, not only just for eVTOL, but for fixed wing electric aircraft in commercial operations or regional operations. And in the bottom right, there 2.5 million kilograms. That's the carbon emission savings that we suspect that we can take off of roads by road users specifically transporting or transferring to electric aviation. So if you're interested, contact me through either LinkedIn or Twitter at Daryl Aviation, and thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Daryl. So that sets the scene quite nicely. We've got a wide range of businesses, from funds, companies actively who have taken on investment and now building this stuff out. And then Daryl, obviously, with his wisdom and all the analysis that he's just shown us. Are you back, Michael? Brilliant. Good to see you. So look, I'm going to open up a question for the panel in general. One for everyone, really, to set the scene. Just going to kind of notify the audience again. Do send through your questions. We'll try and feed them in. So Future Flight and Innovate UK kind of set out this vision, right, for a predictable, harmonized, sustainable, scalable, and most importantly, I think, commercially viable future aviation system by 2030. Big numbers on what the market's going to look like in 2030. One of the studies I've seen, 74 billion. Quite hard to visualize and see that in real life. So I suppose as we progress along this roadmap that the Future Flight's laid out, so from present day, where we're looking at development and we're now moving into this demonstration phase, 2026 industrialization and moving towards that service-based and almost mobility as a service type system. How do we get there? How does this look like? What are the opportunities? What are the challenges? How do we start to unlock some of this investment? Big question. I don't mind. Who wants to take it on first? Michael? Michael from Nexa, would you like to go for it?
I'd be delighted to. Yeah. First of all, Daryl, that is tremendous work you've done. We have our own demand modeling capability, but what you've just shown is really fantastic, and that's where demand modeling needs to evolve. We need to make use of cell phone data and the type of analytics that you've put together. So that's really, really exciting. I'll make a general comment about the size of the market. Our own investment forecasts show that this is a $1 trillion market opportunity, but it needs to be understood what that number means. That's not $1 trillion per year. That's cumulative revenue opportunity and CapEx opportunity over a period of time. In the case of our research, we think that for the 85 cities that we've studied very carefully from an investment standpoint, that it's about a $1.5 trillion market over 20 years. So to have a little more context, we think the size of the eVTOL sector and the drone sector will probably get up to between 5 and 10% of the size of the airline industry. It will grow into that. And the airline industry today is $1 trillion per year industry. So our sector is, it's very exciting what we're doing, but there's a lot of confusion about the numbers. And you can still make a darn good investment in advanced air mobility and still get buried in the revenue opportunity. But in the context of it all, I do encourage people to remind others that this is not $1 trillion per year market. This will go in that direction. It's all very exciting, but we just need to understand that. With respect to demand modeling, it's so important for our investors to understand the phasing in of services, the use cases that are going to be essential early starters, because investing hundreds of millions of dollars into urban areas for whether it's ground infrastructure or UTM, which is the air traffic control related stuff, we want to do that in phases. We'd like to break a construction project down so that over let's say a 10-year period, we've got 3 or 4 tranches of capital that have gone in to build out infrastructure in a sensible way so that we get to early revenues, and those early revenues and ticket sales can produce fees that our bondholders and investors can see as a return on their investment.
Brilliant, thank you. And Addison, I mean, you working on kind of both the infrastructure side and also on kind of the drone and vehicle development. How are you seeing things? How do you see the opportunities and challenges around investment? I mean, you guys have been invested in by big C firms yourselves and other airports and other kind of airports and infrastructure players. How do you see that going forward? What types of things do you need to see coming your way and investment from across the other stakeholders to really push on that development?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that always is a big unlock for investment and helps investors to see where some place is going is when there's a physical actual product being used commercially, and we're not really there yet on many sectors of this industry. There are no eVTOLs certified to date. Someone obviously, when that happens, I think that will be a big unlock. It's certainly a question that we get often, which is this going to happen? When will it happen? And we're just maybe some hesitancy until that does, because Skyports, for example, developing the infrastructure, there's only so much we can control. We're not the entire value chain. So that's certainly will be a big unlock. But you have other areas like, for example, drones, where the technology is there, and it's actually more about the regulations. And specifically there, it's about the regulations for flying beyond visual line of sight. So there's the technology development. There's also the regulatory advances that will unlock commercial opportunities and allow investment to pour in as actual commercially viable use cases increase in number. So I think those would be the two major things I'd highlight here is where I see the big unlocks coming, and I do see them coming. I think they will happen. It's just a matter of when they do, and that will be a game changer for investment.
Yeah, I'm with you. And Michelle, from an Ampere kind of perspective, you guys are looking to fly these vehicles. You're looking to get them going. How does kind of regulation sit within this? How do you view kind of where the opportunities and challenges are for you over the next couple of years, then 5-6 years onwards?
Yeah, to further on what Edison said there, I think what is definitely driving the market forward is being able to do actual demonstrations with actual products. I mean, seeing is believing in the end, and that's why we were also very happy actually with the Future Fly Challenge, which is really moving forward to these demonstrations. We've been able to demonstrate our Cessna 337 in phase 2 already. Moving to a bigger aircraft, hopefully in phase 3. But that really shows people, I think, that it's not just something on paper, it is really here. Having said that, I think an opportunity in this market is that this is not an optional market in the sense that we need to address sustainable transport in general and sustainable aviation as a part of that. And we may also need, as I think also Daryl highlighted, rethink the entire mobility market from door to door. And we definitely see that this distributed aviation can play a big role in there. So in that sense, we think the market must be there. We need to change the way we travel. So there is a guaranteed market. So that's definitely also an opportunity. Regulations are, of course, always a challenge, which is exactly one of the reasons why we're also moving towards the retrofit, is trying to focus only on what is new and not try to certify a whole new aircraft in one go, but really focus on the hybrid electric and taking it on a step-by-step basis. And one of the challenges we also see with that is, which I think everybody in this market should be a bit careful of, is the over-promising. Obviously, all the startups are looking for investors, and there's nothing wrong with being optimistic in timelines, but we need to be careful sometimes that we're not over-promising it. We've already seen in some cases that companies have been promising stuff in terms of timelines that they haven't been able to live up to. And it would be a shame if investors at some point would shy away a little bit because they get disappointed on the actual progress versus what has been touted. So, but on the other hand, we should be a bit optimistic, and we need to shake up the market. So there's a balance there, I guess, that we need to find in being optimistic, but yet realistic, in order also, I think, to get the investors' commitment for the longer term.
Yeah, and I think we'll build off that. Really, there's been a question that's come in from the audience that was looking at essentially where are you guys seeing investor sentiment at the moment? I mean, there's been a lot of dollars going into some companies across AAM, across digital physical infrastructure, but kind of where are you seeing? And how do you think investors are then looking at, okay, where are the opportunities here? And is it that piece of, I need to see more from the industry itself, I need to see some more of the regulation unlocked? How does that kind of play out in some of the conversations you guys are having? I don't know who wants to pick it up, but go for it. Whoever wants to jump in.
I'll chime in quickly. On the investor side, it's been interesting watching the last few weeks, the infrastructure investors actually starting to really make their announcements. So I was up in Glasgow a couple of weeks ago when Ferrovial made their announcement of investment of, 30 vertiports across 25 cities. So don't believe the media, they've got it wrong. I was there, I was moderating the day. But to have Ferrovial making those announcements that they're investing in vertiport infrastructure because they are a big company, they have the cash to do that, to see what Skyports is doing in Milan with other credible airport operators and owners, that's absolutely fantastic stuff there from Skyports is really giving confidence. But there's other people out there that are doing it. So we've also seen Nice along with ADR and Bologna Airport announced that they're doing stuff in there. We also know that some of the other German airport operators are going to be making those investments. So that's great. We know that there's investment coming into the vehicle side, which is fantastic. So it's really just trying to bring all this together. And I think it's interesting that we do have to moderate some of the discussion because there are a lot of announcements out there about it's going to happen by this date and that date. But we also got to think about, yes, these vehicles might get certified by a certain date, but then we have the fabrication process that needs to be certified. And then we have their ability to ramp up to higher volumes of production. And they'll be putting those vehicles into a global market. So right now we actually have a bit of a competition between global cities to try and put the right infrastructure in for that. So it's going to be a little bit longer of a burn than what I think people think it is. But equally, we need that investment in early so that we can make the right investments in the right place to enable it.
Brilliant. Michael, I'm interested to hear Nexa's point of view on this. How are you kind of seeing sentiment at the moment? Are you seeing, okay, it's kind of fair? Are you seeing there's a lot of kind of appetite for certain areas? Where are you kind of seeing things across the market?
I think that the infrastructure community, the investment community, those fund managers used to financing infrastructure for other modes of transportation are on a steep learning curve right now. There is just unbelievable capital sitting on the sidelines. There's probably around $2 trillion worth of capital that's underutilized, and fund managers are very interested in seeing solid business cases where the stakeholder group, through the type of P3 structure, are willing to work together for a period of several years. This would include transit operators or bus operators or metro operators on a city-by-city basis. And there's a lot of work associated with just getting there and putting together a good business plan for an urban area. There's no national opportunity here that we see in the United States or Canada. We do see cities needing to grasp this new mobility opportunity and organize it through consortia that include a wide range of stakeholders, and to have good work done in order for investors to come in and confidently put money down for construction. So things that a lot of people don't think about. We expect to see an engineering firm, an A&E firm, for example, as part of a consortium, so that that firm has done transportation studies. They can produce good cost information for CapEx investment programs, that the city or the metro operator has a willingness to grant concessions. I mean, there's a lot of detail associated with getting this all pulled together. And then, of course, you have demand modeling and things that Daryl had talked about. This is really it's a tough and discipline needed process. I think everybody on the panel here understands what I'm articulating.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. And Addison, Michelle, from your kind of perspective, you guys are in the trenches building companies here, right? You're actively looking to scale some of this up and dealing with these challenges on a daily basis. How are you seeing kind of that landscape in general? How are you feeling sentiment towards the market, whether that's from stakeholders you're working with, from the investors that you have on board already? Be interested to get your takes. Whoever wants to jump in first, go ahead.
Yeah, I can try to jump in here. So obviously we are more on the vehicle side, so I don't really have an eye out for the investments in the infrastructure side. We've been talking a bit about the advanced air mobility and vertiports type of investments. I think people seem to be looking at that, but we're more talking to regional airports, so it's the existing airport infrastructure, where we think we can unlock more airports into this distributed aviation network. But they've been struggling tremendously, obviously, with the COVID periods. And I think there's a big question on the table is how we can get these airports to invest, or people to help them invest in their infrastructure. But that really is something that needs to happen in order for the whole market to work out. Because if the airports don't make the investment in the infrastructure, the airlines won't make ultimately the buy of the vehicles. And if that doesn't happen, then at some point the investors will shy away from the vehicle investments as well. So we really need to look at the whole ecosystem readiness perspective here. And one thing that hasn't been highlighted now is actually also the investment in human capital. We really need to get skilled people for these new air vehicles also and the new infrastructure into the marketplace as well. We need people that know all these new energy carriers, hydrogen, electric. There's new components coming into play there. We need licensed mechanics to be able to service all these aircraft if we're going to scale up. It's not just about the aircraft and the infrastructure. We need to scale up the people as well. And that's something that is sometimes overlooked. And knowing that sometimes the curriculum for aviation mechanics is like a 4-year study, we don't really have much time to wait actually in investing in that as well. So I would definitely like to highlight that also as an important point.
Addison, do you feel that across business?
Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of pick up on the infrastructure point a little bit. I mean, first of all, it's great that that's more in the discussion than it was early days in this industry. Understandably, the vehicle investment is going to lead this, but we're glad that infrastructure is more part of the discussion now. I think one challenge is if you look at typical infrastructure investors, infrastructure funds, they're not necessarily investing in things that are kind of venture capital backed. And so it's just a very different risk profile. And, on the flip side, venture capital firms, their sweet spot is often things like software that's very scalable, asset light, which infrastructure is not. So it fits into, a bit of a challenging niche from that perspective. But the momentum in the industry is such that I'm not concerned that the investors will eventually get there. It's just a bit of a maybe a mental block or just something to get around in these early days.
Cool. And I mean, it'd be interesting to kind of pick up a little bit. We've got some questions coming in from the audience, which I will pick up on. But just kind of, how does this look geographically at the moment? Where are the kind of runaways? I mean, we're seeing quite a lot of action here in the UK. We've obviously got this great community together, but we have 4 panelists, well, from 3 different countries, all operating in different spaces. I know many of you work international. I don't know, Daryl, do you want to pick up on that and tell us a little bit about how things are being seen across the globe?
So I'm lucky in that I'm supporting NASA in a couple of programs. So they're transformative vertical flight programs that they have there. There's 2 different groups. We're in the process of actually merging them right now. So I get a good view of what's happening in the US. And I think definitely the US is stealing the march in terms of investment from a government perspective and from an industry perspective. Of course, a lot of this has come out of the electric car industry, which seems to be centered in the US. So that spurred a lot of investment, a lot of early investors in it. So recently, the U.S. government, and Michael will be able to tell us more about that, they put in a new bill, which is basically supporting investment in electric aviation and infrastructure. So I think they're doing well there. NASA are on the job, of course. And then they have the Agility Prime program. So the U.S. Air Force investing in technology to support advanced air mobility. Following closely, I think the UK is actually doing really well with the Future Flight program. Phase 3, the applications have just gone in. I'm on a phase 2 project at the moment. So there's a lot of good stuff going on in the UK, but the UK could be doing a lot more. And we're just in the last throes of responding to the government's call for comments on their future flight ambitions. The Scandinavian countries have done very well, but I also see a lot of Asian countries starting to catch up, and particularly I'd point towards Japan. But that actually seems to be coming more from the Japanese conglomerates as opposed to the government itself. So people just going out there and saying, "Hey, let's do this." So yeah, I think UK is in a good spot, but we could be doing a lot better.
Cool. Anyone else have any kind of reflections on the kind of geographical side of things? You want to jump in? Go for it. Michael, you there?
Yes, I'm sorry, I was on mute. So we're always looking for the lowest hanging fruit, if I can put it that way. Although I mean we are fairly concentrated in North America, in Canada, and the United States right now. And there are certain cities that provide certain opportunity. Cities like Miami, Vancouver, the cities that generally have very active helicopter sectors. where the society seems to have permitted these noisy things flying around. And it's helpful that these are water cities because you can create flight paths over water and not be so offensive to local residents, that sort of thing. New York City falls into that as well. So I think over the next probably couple of years, we're going to end up seeing focus cities. There might be a dozen of them in the United States where capital is flowing in, created largely through the crucible of stakeholder interest on a local basis, on an urban or urban region basis. Granted, NASA is working hard. Agility Prime is putting money into the sector. There's a heavy focus on propulsion and other technologies like hydrogen. So there's a lot of churn and chop in the sector. But from the standpoint of infrastructure, I think this time next year, you'll probably bear witness to 5, 6, 10 cities in North America that are beginning to make those first investments in infrastructure. And of course, there's also the ATM side of it. This ATM requires a big investment. If you look at cities like New York, I think this answers one of the questions, by the way, that's in the chat box.
Really?
If you take one city like New York has about a $1.4 trillion economy. This is Greater New York. That's per year. And congestion costs New York about $100 billion a year in drag on the economy. It's a significant problem, and advanced air mobility can go some way toward alleviating that drag on the economy. But in order to bring up the city with infrastructure like vertiports, multiports, airport facilities, there are 20 airports in the greater New York City area, but it will require an investment in our numbers of about $315 million just to get started on ground infrastructure, and there's other infrastructure that's needed as well. So my point, though, on this is that the revenue opportunity for a city like New York is in the range of about $10 to $12 billion over a 20-year forecast period. So there's plenty of revenue to service debt that would be put forward by investors. And that's the business case that has to be brought forward on a city-by-city basis. Of course, there's lots of other stuff involved. The community integration aspect is very critical. But just from a dollars and cents standpoint, this industry should easily attract private capital necessary to build out all the infrastructure needed. It is that need for consortia, partnerships, and good cost estimates, where everybody's in this together. The 4 supply chains that we talk about all the time, all 4 supply chains have to be profitable. You can't just expect that an operator is going to make money when everybody else is losing. So the important thing is to understand that this is a rather complex business case.
No, definitely, and maybe that's why we take it now into kind of the company revenue opportunity and more kind of focusing on maybe a bit of Ampere and Skyport's experience. I mean, I'll start with Addison. You guys have taken on some venture capital dollars, I think, from Levitate, but also kind of made that strategic card with ADP, Airport de Paris, and Deutsche Bahn. How do you kind of see that mix? Is that something you think will continue to spread, especially across kind of maybe the infrastructure side? This is kind of a key thing for companies like yourselves, perhaps even your competitors. It's pulling in their strategic players, really building that kind of strategic element to these investments.
Yeah, absolutely. As we built our investor base, we did think about it very strategically. So we were looking for more than just capital alone. We wanted investors who brought in technical expertise and relationships as well. So you mentioned Group ADP and Deutsche Bahn, big infrastructure players, with Group ADP, of course, being aviation infrastructure, which is fantastic. another investor, Irelandia Aviation, that we have. It's the family office of the Ryan family of Ryanair and several other airlines. That aviation expertise, especially with Declan Ryan sitting as our chairman, that's fantastic for us, and it's even resulted in a joint venture we have in Colombia with Irelandia that we announced recently. So those are just a couple examples. You mentioned Levitate as well. Levitate has a portfolio of companies that we've been able to have great relationships with too.
Yeah, and then just before we move on to kind of the Ampere side, just one more Skyports. What does that look like in operationally? How are those kind of investors working with you? What do they demand of you? How do they work with you to solve some of those complex challenges that we've just been discussing for the last half an hour? How does that reporting look to those guys, and how do they work with you?
Yeah, I mean, how it looks kind of operationally or tactically is that we go to them with pretty explicit asks. You're our investor, you're sitting on our board. We also need you to help us find customers in Latin America, and picking up on the Irelandia point. And so that might start at the board level, but then it quickly becomes operational when we do something like set up that JV in Colombia. And now we are using those relationships that Viva Colombia has in that region to try to find the customers that we need for our drone deliveries business.
Yeah, brilliant. It makes a lot of sense. And bring that over to kind of the Ampere side. You guys have also, I think it was an acquisition you went through, and I think that was kind of strategic play also for the demand of customers. Am I right? Michelle, would you be able to unpack a little bit of that for us, how that plays into kind of the wider business and how you work closely with those guys?
Yeah, there's an acquisition ongoing. It's actually still not completed, so I can't also give too much details because of that. But with Surf Air Mobility, Surf Air Mobility is a company that is also, I would say, changing the aviation regional aviation business model more to a subscription-based type of model where you just have a subscription, and depending on your subscription level, you can get access to more or less flights, basically, or different type of flights. And so they'll look at scheduled services and also at on-demand. But they definitely also had an ambition for sustainable aviation. So there, I think, is where you have sort of a vertical integration in the value chain ongoing in teaming up with Ampere, where for them, they can be an early adopter and become very knowledgeable about these new type of vehicles and the good things and the bad things, I would say. So there's learning from them there. And from the Ampere side, obviously, we can get very good insight in how they would see the restructuring of aviation, customer demands, operator demands, mobility demands. So also definitely for Ampere there, I think there's a good synergy there. And I fully agree also with Edison that in this market, it definitely helps if you don't have investors that are only in there for the money, so to speak, but can definitely also, they know the sector and they can provide help with their experience, with their network, with their outreach to customers. I think that's all very valuable because the aviation is a capital intensive market, basically, so for the long term as well. So and by getting links with players that are already active in the market and have a position there themselves, I think they understand that better, and there's much more synergy there than just purely the financial aspect of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I do wonder how that changes as we progress towards 2030. Who starts getting involved at what stages across this development, scale up, etc. When do those kind of returns-driven venture funds start getting involved? Is that at some point in 2026, 2027? Who knows?
Yeah, I think, of course, traditionally you see the pure venture capitalist investors becoming active the moment that there is already a turnover flow, and you've reached the market first and more for the scale-up phase. Then definitely, I think you will see some of these other players starting to move in as well, because then the main risk, I think, has been mitigated for them, which I think the regulatory side. And so I think you'll see that coming in probably the second half of hopefully of this decade, when if all goes well, we will see the actual first aircraft being launched into the market. And as Daryl already mentioned, that's the time when we need to switch from the development and bringing it to the market to actually scaling up the production and getting these vehicles out there in the numbers that are needed to also transform the aviation model.
Yeah, I mean, definitely right. And I think from the research that I've done, I think this kind of demonstration phase is pretty critical into winning over a lot of these use cases, winning over a lot of stakeholders, and kind of showing this stuff and getting that public buy-in, right? I want to ask one more question in general. We have some, as you will see, we've got some questions coming in from the chat, and I'm conscious we want to go through those. I'm going to kind of put something out quite general from, you know, Michael and Daryl, you've got that expertise of looking at companies, but from also from the Ampere and Skyport side on, you've received some of this capital. What advice would you give to the community as you start to build your business case, as you start to look towards investors? What are some of the key things to build into that proposition? But what are also maybe some of the common mistakes you've seen from across the industry experience so far, essentially? So how can some of the community, as they look to get into that demonstration phase, as they start looking towards thinking about private capital or crowding in other investment with partners, what are some of the common pitfalls? What are some of the challenges? What are the things they should be aware of when building that case? Complete free for all. Whoever wants to go for it, pick it up first.
Let me take a stab at that. That is a big question. We could probably use the next few hours to get to the bottom of it. But one thing that I would say is that most of the revenues that will be generated through advanced air mobility use cases will concentrate in operators over time. And I think where we as a community need to look to early wins, we should be considering how to enable existing helicopter operators to become the first adopters. So because they're already certificated, they have safety track records. I think the business model for Blade, as an example, is one of the SPACs that is around these days, is a good but not definitive business model. And the helicopter sector can take and very quickly integrate electric platforms into their operations and begin to produce revenues with those. I'm not really a big believer in total vertical integration. I think that will have challenges because so much of what happens in the helicopter sector is local. Knowing noise abatement regions and so forth, things like that. So I'm not sure I got to your question very well, but I'm just saying that we need to think about the low-hanging fruit, and do whatever's possible to demonstrate safe operations and to encourage through profitability models these early wins. Daryl?
Yeah, I was going to say the devil is in the detail. It really is. I've spent a lot of my career doing airport acquisition work, so helping sovereign wealth funds or pension funds or whomever buy airports, and we get these massive models that we have to go through and take a look at. And I'm always quite surprised to find in the CapEx model there's this category called other. And other usually covers more sins than you really want to dig into. But it really is about digging into the detail, providing credible forecasts and estimations of growth of the traffic and where the revenue is going to come from. I think on the eVTOL side, vertiports, and I know that Duncan Walker has said it, passengers are really not going to spend a lot of time in the terminal building. So that really starts to affect some of the revenue side that is going to come out. So the commercial opportunities that normally come out of airport terminals may not necessarily be there. So we have to look at the other sources of revenue. I probably differ a little bit in terms of Michael saying that the revenue may accumulate in the operators. Yes, they will. But I think the vertiport owner operators or the airport owner operators will accrue a lot of money out of there. But probably the big winners in this game are actually going to be the people that are selling the tickets. As we move more to a mobility as a service type operation, and you take a look at your Google Maps app that you have right now, it just has all the modes of transport. And eventually, advanced air mobility will just be another tag up there. They already have the airplane, but it's whether or not they differentiate eVTOL or advanced air mobility. You will buy this as a service. And then just talking to some of the stuff that's been raised by Michael from Ampere, there are more small airports that are closer to passengers' origins and destinations than there are large airports with great surface access. So in the distributed aviation paper, almost 50% of the frequencies offered peaked at about 200 nautical miles. And this is in 2019, turboprop and turbojet aircraft. And these aircraft have ranges out to about 1,400 nautical miles. But the operators were choosing to fly them in about 200 nautical mile ranges. And I think that's absolutely right for fixed wing electric aircraft or hybrid electric aircraft operations. So I think that there's as big of a market, if not a bigger market, for fixed wing electric aviation as there is with eVTOL. eVTOL is going to happen, but we've got a lot of infrastructure that's underutilized, and that's definitely underpinned in the NASA regional air mobility paper. So it's going to be an interesting few years, especially as we get aircraft certified and in the air, looking for those routes to fly. And we're already seeing companies like EasyJet trying to invest in fixed wing electric aircraft. United has ordered a bunch of them. So we're seeing those trends happening.
Brilliant. Any other takes? Addison, Mikhail, do you want to go
Yeah.
for it? About running through some other questions from the audience.
Yeah. Just in terms of kind of recommendations for those seeking funding, I think there are a lot of lessons that can be learned from other startups and other nascent industries. Like, don't lose track of the customer and only focus on technology. Some of those are quite generalizable, but just one recommendation I might suggest for this industry specifically is that it can be really helpful to look for investors who have more of a stake than just the economics. So maybe they have an ESG or specifically an environmental mandate, and this industry can really bolster that. That will be very, very helpful strategically, beyond just the capital that they bring. It's not just environmental either. There are other angles here, but that can, I think, be a really great way to find that capital and to find an investor who's looking to be a strategic partner as well.
No, agreed.
Yeah, fully agree with that. And indeed, there is a bit more than just the environmental take on this. There is definitely also bringing more mobility to, I would say, more remote regions where there is other infrastructure is underdeveloped. Everybody is usually touting the railway, like let's not do regional aviation and let's take the train, which is great if the train is already there and if the train is electric, by the way, because else from a sustainability point of view, it doesn't make much sense. But there's definitely areas where there is no rail or where there's islands, for example, where I would say advanced air mobility and regional aviation can definitely help unlock these regions and increase the economy. So fully back up the advice here that in the starting phase, you need to look for impact investors that are in it for more than just the money. From Ampere point of view, accelerators have been proven very valuable as well, especially also clean tech. So we've been hedged by Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator. So that definitely helped to get us started. And then, some of the pitfalls there, I think I already mentioned the over-promising part. I mean, it's always good if you have, usually investment is not just getting a big sack of money for the next 10 years. It's usually in tranches. So you need to make sure that the milestones that you are setting for yourself and which you're promising to the investors have some realism to it. And everybody understands that innovation is a bumpy road. But like I said, don't overstretch your reach in what you promise, because in the end you might find investors pulling out. The power of demonstration, I think, was already mentioned there. The sooner you can actually show something, the better it is. And then I think a last tip is also to get, as part of your team, a nice mix of actual industry experience of people who have actually brought aviation products to the market. And I would say young creative minds that are willing to challenge the status quo. And I think that's a very important mix. Where you get very good chemistry on one hand, trying to shake things up, but on the other hand, trying to keep it real and also trying to keep the timelines real. Brilliant.
That's really good. Okay, I'm just conscious of time, 8 or so minutes. We've got some questions to go through from the community, from the audience. I'm just going to read them out and jump in as you feel appropriate, really. We've got 5 or so minutes to get through them. Let's see if we can. So we've talked about this a little bit, revenue opportunity. So a question comes in, can you clarify the revenue opportunity? Do you see this as just ticket sales, or what about manufacturing market, and what about the infrastructure opportunity? We've touched on it a little. Anyone want to add to that at all?
Well, when we talk about the market opportunity, we have to also include the four most critical supply chains that will make this industry happen. So it starts with the operators themselves, who have to acquire eVTOLs and put them into operation, charge for passenger tickets, etc. But the second is ground infrastructure. The third is UTM, and the fourth supply chain is vehicle manufacturing. So with those four in mind, this potential $1 trillion 20-year or 25-year market is the pieces of the pie are interesting. There's an expectation that there's about 50 to 70 billion dollars worth of vehicle sales coming up, but that number pales in comparison to what the revenue forecast might be for passengers. So passenger tickets. So it's contextual, and that's what I wanted to say.
Cool. Anyone would like to add anything before we move on?
Well, I think for me it is as Michael says, the whole supply chain. But I'm really wondering whether parts of industry are going to come in and start helping out with this. So the idea of mobility as a service. What does that look like in terms of? And this is where I'm kind of wondering if those kind of IATA clearing houses where all the fares are cleared through, kind of thing, whether or not those types of operators are actually going to walk away with all the real money, which I kind of suspect they will. And if anybody's interested, give me a shout. I'll tell you who I think is going to win. But yeah, I think the vertiport investors have a good chance of actually making a lot of money out of this, because they are basically enabling a lot of the industry in itself. But how that looks in terms of practical, so landing charges, passenger charges, or power recharging services, or hydrogen, or whatever energy source they're using. So it's very interesting. I just wanted to put a quick shout out for Flight Crowd, an organization here in the UK, which is actually working on the social acceptance side of the equation, because the one thing that keeps me up at night is trying to make sure that we get social acceptance for this mode of transport, because aviation does have a tarnished image. We're trying to repair that with electric aviation or hybrid powered aviation. But we need to be working better as an industry to engage the public, the wider public, who are going to enable us to put the infrastructure in. Because if you don't get the public buy-in for planning applications for vertiports or fixed-wing electric aircraft infrastructure, then the whole industry just dies before it even starts. So just one quick shout there.
Perfect.
Yeah, I would even like to add one more value chain to the ones that Michael said, which is the aftermarket support for the vehicles, and actually also for the vertiports. Things need maintenance. Vehicles need maintenance, and I'm actually also wondering about the whole logistics and spare parts model that will start especially with the advanced air mobility. I think for the regional air mobility business where Ampere is in, it's going to be pretty standard to the normal aviation. But if you've got all these advanced air mobilities, VTOL platforms flying around from many locations, how are you going to manage these sort of the aircraft on ground type of occurrences? And beside the vertiport being there to support the passengers, where are you going to do the maintenance? And especially if you need urgent maintenance, is an aircraft on the helipad going to close up the whole vertiport for others as well? So I think people really need to look at the real operations, and especially how things can go wrong from a weather perspective, from a maintenance perspective, etc. So I think the whole the resilience of the market is important to look at. But in terms of value chains and revenue chains, I think there's also going to be an interesting revenue model for companies, and whether that's going to be the manufacturers or specialized companies like you see now in aviation on supporting that aftermarket and maintenance part.
Brilliant. Any closing thoughts from you, Addison? I'm very conscious of time.
I think it's been a great discussion. I think we've covered a lot.
Go on for a while, I imagine.
Nothing more to add on this. That's what the topic.
Well, on that note, thank you. Well, Addison, Michael, thank you for getting up so early. We really appreciate you being here, and I hope the community does too. There may be a few other questions that we have missed off. Feel free to send them over. We'll pose them via email to the panel and see if we can get anything back to you on those. But thank you, I think, is my big point here. I've got a few slides to run through before everyone runs off. So just reporting in really on the future flight landscape map. This is all there, ready for you to have a view. It's on the KTN website, and you should be able to register for that pretty simply. Just through going for the link, you search future flight landscape map and KTN, it will come straight up. And then we finally just staying in touch. So there's nothing more coming over 2021, but Hannah, Michelle, and the team will be back in 2022 and hopefully be able to bring you all together in some more Future Flight Fridays. So that's everything today. I could probably go on for a while. I'm sure some of the panelists could too. But thank you very much. And thanks everyone for joining. So that's us. Thank you very much.
The world is shaping up for a revolution in aviation innovation. In the UK, businesses are already creating new, innovative, greener air transport solutions designed to offer more choice and reduce our carbon footprint. The Future Flight Challenge from UK Research and Innovation aims to create the aviation system of the future, allowing us to improve transport links between regions and in remote areas to connect people to education, jobs and healthcare. Our £125 million investment will allow the UK to build, use and export new transport technologies and be at the forefront of aviation innovation. We're bringing together industry experts to carry out research, development and demonstrations to solve mobility challenges in the UK. By encouraging innovators from a wide variety of sectors to work together, the projects we fund will help shape novel aviation approaches to enable the safe operation of radically new aircraft. Using drones to offer alternative ways of delivering goods and services, both in highly populated and remote areas. Carrying out offshore maintenance and surveillance for the renewable energy sector. The delivery of medical supplies. Surveying buildings after a fire or collapse to reduce the risk to human life. Or post-incident filming for evidence gathering. Using new and sustainable fuel sources to lower carbon emissions from advanced air mobility vehicles and electric or hybrid aircraft to help address the mobility and congestion problems in urban areas, and improve travel connections for rural communities where the development of ground infrastructure is difficult. These new modes of air transport will combine in a coordinated airspace where scheduled and on-demand flights work together to move people, goods and services. To enable widespread safe use of autonomous and electric air vehicles, Future Flight will bring together advanced technologies with control and regulation, physical and digital infrastructure systems, and new operating models. This new environment will be a catalyst for businesses to invest in the UK as we shape the global future of aviation and create a truly integrated aviation system. With a truly all-inclusive approach, future flight is transformational and will change our lives.